evening and welcome to the India Development Debate right here on ET Now. I'm Supriya Srinath. Now, when it comes to right to privacy, the Modi government's track record is far from being impressive. In a highly controversial move, the government has now set its sight on online and social media content. Interestingly, the new diktat comes within a few days after the centre empowered 10 agencies to snoop down on your computer resources and your smartphones. There is now a proposal to amend the Information Technology Act to completely do away with end-to-end encryption. Now, once the new law is in force, it will make cops and security agencies to snoop down on WhatsApp and Facebook messages. Under the new law, social media firms will be obliged to provide details of messages on their platforms within 72 hours after a request is made. Not just that, the government is also working on a proposal that will make it mandatory for the likes of Facebook and WhatsApp to deploy automated tools to weed out unlawful content. Right activists say the government is using the garb of national security to snoop down on individuals ahead of the upcoming general elections. The Modi government's direct attack on the right to privacy is exactly what we're discussing right here on the India Development Debate this evening. I'm Supriya Srinath, and let me take you across to a stellar panel that's joining us right here. Pranesh Prakash, affiliated fellow, Yale Information Society Project; Vrinda Bhandari, a lawyer. We also have Amit Malviya representing the BJP. He's the IT cell chief there, and Sanjay Jha, spokesperson of the Congress Party. Thank you very much, all of you, for being with us. And Amit, because you represent the ruling benches, and this is a government that's making calls and a government that you represent, it's only fair that I start with you. Social media surveillance hub, blanket permission for agencies to snoop on computers, a draft to now change Section 79 of the IT Act. While the Ministry of Electronics and IT draft says that this is being done with a view to curb the misuse of social media platforms and to crack down on fake news, many people believe this again is an instance of government seeking data on users. How worried should we be? And you cannot get away by saying that this is going to be consultative and all of that, because this is yet another proof, yet another instance of where privacy is being impinged upon. Amit.
Supriya, you've raised several points, and therefore please be patient while I respond to each one of them. This whole spectre of privacy was raised, and the din was so loud when the Aadhaar was being implemented in the run-up to the Supreme Court judgment. Eventually, the Supreme Court looked at all the facets of the Aadhaar and gave it a clean chit. And therefore, I would caution you to get too carried away by what the rights activists are saying, or the privacy activists are saying in this case. The first point on the amendment to the Information Technology Act of 2009, which allow the state to intercept and decrypt information. This law has been there forever. In fact, it was brought in 2009, and there's an RTI which says that the UPA snooped on 9,000 phone calls and 500 emails monthly. All of those were done illegally, were unlawful, because there was no specified agency who could do it, and there was no approval process.
I mean, that's my point.
What the NDA has
that's
done
my point.
is put in a list of agencies who could do that.
Amit, that's my point. Answer the question that I've asked you. Let's not go back to UPA. I have UPA.
Can I please finish?
All I'm saying is answer the question of the day.
If you're not going to allow me to make my point, then
yeah,
I won't be able to. Yes, I'm coming to
go
that.
Ahead.
You've already
go
interrupted
ahead,
me twice, before I could complete what I had to say. Coming on the amendment to the 79 article that you spoke about, there has been a lot of talk in our country, as has been the case globally, about the rising menace of fake news, about information being out there on social media, which could either disrupt national security, which could be used for smuggling, drugs, or it could just be promoting trafficking. Several instances, those have been pointed out. Islamic jihadi organizations using social media to recruit people, all of that has been seen. We've had news of people being beaten up to death on the fear of child lifting because it was amplified using social media. What the government is essentially trying to do is to put in a law which will enable it to seek information from these platforms should there be a concern on any of these parameters. It's just not national security, several other things that I spoke to you about, and the social media platforms will be obliged to give this information. One way is to do it without a law, without a legal framework, and as it is being done in the last several years that we've had our country operate under a democratic framework, or you create a law which will make it obligatory for companies to part with information, and for anybody who feels aggrieved or victimized, go to the judicial process and seek a remedy. It does both. So in a sense, it actually protects the rights of the individual more than what it was earlier. It makes the process more transparent, and therefore it makes the government more accountable to the people, as well as protect their information. And one last point, as far as the data is concerned, anybody who uses a Google account, who uses a Facebook, a Twitter, or a WhatsApp is anyway giving a lot of his personal information out. What we need to educate people is that when they give their information, they should know that this is the information that they've given out, and what is the minimum that they can give. And that kind of awareness is important.
Okay, Amit, I'm sorry, I'll have to stop you there. I will just request my panelists to not make their answers too long, because there are lots of points that we need to cover. This is an important issue. It's causing panic in a lot of people. It's only fair that we discuss these issues, but keep your answers brief and to the point. I am not very impressed with what you're trying to say here, but let me go across to my experts and see what their opinion on this is. Because any enforcement of law which impinges on the right to privacy is not acceptable. But anyways, I get your point that you're trying to fine-tune a law and all of that. Let me see if Pranesh agrees with you. And Pranesh, some of the amendments include asking sites to deploy tech to proactively identify, remove harmful content, breaking of the end-to-end encryption to trace origin of messages, a 72-hour timeline within which companies have to reply to a government query. It is obviously apparent that the government has WhatsApp on mind when it looks at this crackdown, but this is going to affect every online platform that operates in India, and which is why the concern is in many minds that is this going to impinge upon the freedom to speech, expression, and privacy?
Absolutely. So it seems to me Mr. Malviya hasn't actually read the proposed amendments to the regulation. Again, let's be clear that this isn't a statute. This is just a regulation. So it doesn't. It's not going before Parliament right now. It's something the government is passing. Now, this isn't just about social media. This is about all intermediaries. Now, this law, for instance, allows even intermediaries like banks, which are online intermediaries, to be asked to part with information that under other laws, they may actually be restricted from providing to the government unless it comes through proper channels. This law doesn't have the sufficient safeguards. Similarly, this law puts in place a regime of censorship. We opposed it when the UPA brought it in 2012, and we are continuing to oppose it now when it's being pushed forward even more aggressively by the NDA government. It, for instance, requires banning of all manners of speech which are not even illegal in India. For instance, you can disparage someone in India without it being unlawful, yet online you are not allowed to do that under this regulation. And proactively, an ISP such as Airtel will be required under this law, or a cyber cafe will be required to ensure that you don't write something that is disparaging. So why should your ISP be involved in policing your speech? Okay, and that's why the drafters of this amendment, and indeed of the original regulations, have not at all thought about this. Some parts of this have already been struck down by the Supreme Court, and even that which has been struck down by the Supreme Court, just one instance I'll give you, which was to say that ISPs and online Facebook, etc., don't know what is unlawful, so you can't just ask them to remove content that is unlawful. Yet now They're asking them
Okay.
to do
Okay.
so proactively without even a government request. So that is exactly what the Supreme Court struck
Precisely.
down in the Priya single case, and now that's been brought back in. Now, are they
Exactly.
actually caring about the Constitution at all? It doesn't seem so to
Right.
me.
Okay. Okay. Pranesh, give me a minute because I also want to talk about the regulation of the platforms themselves. And then I'll come to you. The other amendments include asking platforms to be incorporated under the Companies Act, have a permanent registered office, appoint a nodal officer as a point of contact in India to coordinate with the enforcement agencies. Now, there are about 500 million internet connections in India. Most platforms have over 5 million users. How cumbersome is this really going to be? How are they going to manage to do this? Vrinda.
I mean, I think it's definitely going to be, yeah, I think it's definitely obviously going to be cumbersome. And I think, I mean, the point you've touched upon ties in with the larger issue with the regulations, which we also see in Rule 3.9, which is what you had mentioned about proactively, identifying unlawful content, which is that all the burden is being placed on these intermediaries. And the idea is essentially to get the intermediaries to engage in censorship. And obviously, intermediaries, for fear of any action, will proactively start censoring content. Now, what does it mean to say unlawful content? What does it mean to say that this data is going to now be retained for 180 days or more if the government agencies so require? So I think all of these concerns, the fact that they have to be registered in India and they have to be under the Companies Act, etc. Obviously, all of these issues I think are pointing to the role being placed on intermediaries to start engaging in censorship. And I think just 2 points in addition, like I think I completely agree with what Pranesh has said, and it's very important for us to realize that these are regulations. They can be done by executive notification. You do not need to have the kind of parliamentary debate that is necessary for bringing about an amendment to the law. And we also must remember that all these changes are being made in an environment where today we still do not have a data privacy bill. Even in the Aadhaar judgment, which Mr. Malviya referred to, the court has again and again said that we need a data privacy bill. We must remember that all these changes are happening, whether it was the MHA notification on which you had a discussion 2 days ago, or whether it is this, all of this is happening in a sort of legal vacuum, which is really troubling.
No, absolutely. There is a legal vacuum. Nobody seems to know what the reference point is, and then these things are coming up. But to the Congress, I have a pointed question as well. And Sanjay, the ruling dispensation points out to what was started by you, and they seem to be only making it official, only making it legal. Even making it legal and official doesn't cut ice with a lot of people, including myself and I think many others on this panel. But I want to point out to one thing, and I think initially one of the big concerns was the process with which this was happening. It was being done by officials, just large platforms and all of that. Now, just a while back, the Electronics and IT Department has invited comments, suggestions from the public on the draft. Is that a sign that pressure has worked and they are willing to engage, take the views and concerns on board? I mean, we are still not a China. That seems to be one big indicator. But isn't that a positive as well? That they're at least willing to take the concerns being raised by the public on board. Because my biggest objection to this was this is going to impact my life, and how can I not be giving a comment as a citizen, as a user of this country? Sanjay.
Supriya, if you look at the Narendra Modi government, I mean, the people of India have a lot of reasons to be apprehensive. Since the BJP spokesperson mentioned Aadhaar, let me give you an example. When the matter was sub judice before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court had not mentioned anywhere that it was necessary to submit your Aadhaar details for a mobile phone or a bank account, they put pressure through the ministries and made sure that millions of people submitted their personal data. So that data has already been captured. It was, I think, in my opinion, an act of political immorality. It was a contempt of the Supreme Court. You see, it's India, and the BJP has got away with murder. I want to give you a second point. End of day, let us not give credit at all to the BJP, because look at their authoritarian tendencies. Until it becomes a matter which becomes a public furor, they are very happy to slide something in. I'll give you an example. They went to the Supreme Court of India and they said the right to privacy is not the fundamental right of Indian citizens. They said you and I don't even have a right to our bodies. This is the argument made by the government to the Supreme Court. And when the Supreme Court upheld the right to privacy as a fundamental right, Ravi Shankar Prasad comes and says that's exactly what the government backs. I mean, who are you trying to fool? The third point,
Right.
I want to say this, Supriya, very candidly. The BJP spokesperson started this debate waxing very eloquent on fake news. But let me tell you, the BJP is a manufacturer of fake news, and Amit Malviya is today on Twitter. There is enough being written about how much he personally peddles with it on GST and Telangana. It is there on Twitter today, how he's lied blatantly. The BJP ministers retweet and tweet fake pictures and images. I mean, this party is dubious, disingenuous and deceitful. And we need to expose them.
Sanjay, let's not make this completely partisan. I think it's very important that we have a deliberate discussion on this. This is going to impact the way internet and, the way we can voice opinions anywhere is concerned. I mean, without my consent. Sanjay, give me a minute. Sanjay, I'll come back to you. Amit, I also have another question to ask of you. And this question really emanates from, the data there is. And obviously this doesn't need parliamentary approval, and that's a point of concern as well, which I'll take up with the lawyers and Pranesh in just a bit. But instead of limiting the amount of data that some of these platforms can extract out of us as citizens of this country, the kind of data they collect, and you said there's a lot of data that they collect on Google and Facebook and all of that. Instead of restricting that data, there is this growing sense that the government is actually trying to collect more data for itself. And shouldn't the debate move to how much private data is being collected by some of these platforms, and maybe a regulation needs to come in there instead of actually not looking into it and trying to regulate what essentially is in the realm of free speech? Amit.
Well, Supriya, since you have 4 voices on your panel, including yours, that is opposed to what I am saying, therefore you should give me that much of time. Point number 1 on Aadhaar, let me go back again and reiterate that the UPA did not have a legal framework. We brought in the Aadhaar Act, and the Supreme Court has essentially said that there is no restriction in linking it to private players like mobile phones and bank accounts, provided there's a legal framework, and the government is mulling a legal framework. So let's not use the arguments selectively. Point number 2, on the platforms per se. You see, Facebook, Twitter, or for that matter, any other platform have specific community guidelines. And if any post violates that community guideline, they actively remove it. So there is a proactive censorship, if you like that phrase, already happening on these platforms, and they specify so. If you want to be a user of their platform, then you have to adhere to that. What the government essentially is saying by this legislation is that should there be a concern and should there be an issue, the government is well within its right to seek information from these platforms, and they will be obliged to do it. Point number 3, it dovetails into the question that you asked, that if these platforms are collecting that kind of information, why doesn't the government restrict it? Now that's a debate that is happening worldwide. It's happening in the European zone, it's happening in America after the Cambridge Analytica thing, which was essentially assisting the Congress here in India also, that how much information should they collect? Recently, Google deposed before the US Congress, and the same questions were posed to them. So it's an ongoing debate, it's a global debate, and we are yet to arrive at an answer as a society which is now embracing a very digital culture. Point number 3, you spoke about this not having a parliamentary sanction. The proposed amendments are out there for people to comment. Depending on the shape and the design that it eventually takes in, it will fit into the constitutional framework. It is always open for a judicial scrutiny should some of the rights and the privacy activists feel that strongly, like they felt in the case of Aadhaar. And I'm glad that we went through the whole process in the Supreme Court, and both these privacy activists, technology evangelists, Congress party and opposition fell flat on it. I'd be quite delighted if they actually have the conviction to take it to the judicial process. But our government is very clear. We are not Jawaharlal Nehru. We are not Indira Gandhi. We are not Rajiv Gandhi. We are not even Sonia Gandhi, who are snooping on people, reading their letters, bringing in the First Amendment. These are facts of history.
boring lectures.
But that is, Amit, I'm sorry.
Has not done and will never do anything that infringes on
Amit Malviya, that is my problem. Amit Malviya, Amit Malviya, that is exactly what my problem with political debates is. We are talking about data, we are talking about a legislation, we are talking about an executive order, we are talking about a rule that will change the way I use internet and how I express my opinion. And by I don't mean Supriya Srinath, I mean all internet users in India. Why are you taking this debate to Jawaharlal Nehru and to Indira Gandhi and to Rajiv Gandhi? I mean, where are we taking this discussion is what I really want to ask my politicians. Anyways, please stop at that, because if tweeting pictures of Jawaharlal Nehru was not enough, let's spare him this discussion right now. But give me a minute, and I want to take this across to Brinda from just a legal point of view. Sanjay, 1 second, you have questions to answer as well, and I'll come to you. And Brinda, my question is that if these changes are notified, how much of the Supreme Court ruling of 2015 gets pushed back? And which is why a lot of people are asking the question, will this really stand the scrutiny of law? I mean, the Supreme Court in 2015 had very categorically said, had struck down Section 66A of the IT Act, which allowed the arrest of those allegedly posting offensive content online. We've seen what bizarre police framework comes into picture when people post things that are offensive. I mean, a girl, because she shouted in a plane against an MP, was arrested for 10 days. What are we talking about? Which state are we talking about? And now we want to have a rule which says you post anything, it's going to be taken off without your consent and without the government intervention. Vrinda, first thing, will this stand the scrutiny of law?
So I don't think it will stand the scrutiny of law. Part of the reason, as you've already mentioned, is the Shreya single standard, which was a judgment that struck down 66A and said that the words such as what is offensive are very vague. And if you just going back to Rule 9.5, even Rule 3.9, sorry, and if I can just read that, it says that the intermediary shall deploy technology-based automated tools or appropriate mechanisms with appropriate controls for proactively identifying and removing or disabling public access to unlawful information or content. Now, again, we have a similar problem like in Shreya Singhal. What is unlawful information or content? It is not defined anywhere. So, the regulation itself is vague. In Shreya Singhal, while striking down 66A, Justice Nariman actually said that an unreasonable law cannot be implemented reasonably. So you can't say, oh, it will be used for X purpose, which is reasonable, because a law that is unreasonable on the face of it, or that is void on the face of it, can't really be administered reasonably. And, just again on this point, it's interesting that the PIB notification, the Press India Bureau notification that came along with these rules today, actually says that the instances of misuse of social media by criminals and anti-national elements. So they actually use these words. Now, if you see all of this in context, I think it's very important, that we look at the 2015 ruling in Shreya Singhal, we look at the court's own ruling in Puttaswamy on privacy, where they talk about the need for necessity and proportionality, and reading all of this together, I think, in my view, that the law wouldn't stand a constitutional challenge.
Okay, just give me a minute, because I want to take this across to Pranesh on one more specific thing, and then I want to take a little bit of a big picture question, both with Sanjay Jha and Amit Malviya, because it's not as if the Congress has had a clean record as well. You arrested people in the name of, offensive tweets and all of that yourself, and you banned books as well. But give me a minute, and I'll go to Pranesh and then come back to all of you. And Pranesh, the draft rule 3, section 8, increases the data retention period, actually doubles it from 90 to 180 days, and provides for further retention on the discretion of government agencies, quote unquote. Now, this means that data can be stored for a longer period of time. This also means that the user doesn't need to be informed for the data being stored, because the user may have deleted it, but the data doesn't get deleted. I mean, the user somehow is in a bind, and damn you if he deletes it, damn you if he doesn't. So this does put the user in the dock, whereas, the user doesn't need to be in the dock, at least on this front. Pranesh.
Absolutely. And let's remember, when we're thinking about these, it's not social media companies alone. Intermediaries covers every kind of thing that comes between content and you, including, for instance, your bank can be intermediary in financial transactions. It could be a cyber cafe that you're visiting. It could be your ISP. It could be all kinds of things who you wouldn't be thinking about. So it's not, this is not just applicable to social media companies. Firstly, the data retention requirement that's been put in place, it doesn't say what kinds of government agencies may require this, right? Any government agency, from the local municipality to some kind of quasi-governmental corporation might actually be able to ask for data retention under this. It is so badly drafted; it makes me nearly cry when, as a lawyer, I read this. It's really terribly drafted, and the worst part is I'm not confident that feedback from people who actually have studied law, like Vrinda and I, will actually make an iota of difference. Because again, we went through this process earlier when, more than 5 years ago, when this regulation was brought in place, we argued that it was unconstitutional in large parts. And further, let's remember, this regulation has been brought under a provision that talks about how intermediaries who are not directly involved in illegal content are actually exempt from being prosecuted for it. So you're not prosecuted for something that the users do, right? So under that, how can they bring in a censorship regime, a surveillance regime, and all manners of requirements
Precisely.
for corporate, corporate life?
Right. Okay.
Set in India, things like this, which are matters for a statute. So if they want to
Exactly. If
pass,
you're not liable,
they should explore that.
Okay, just give me a minute, Pranesh, and I agree with you.
Sorry, Supriya, if I could just add to one thing about what Pranesh is saying.
Don't do it on your own. Vrinda, I'll come back to you. Vrinda, let me come back to you. Sanjay Jha, I want to come to you. And just to quote your own track record, because, you've been considered the architect of this.
Sure.
It was your government which had arrested cartoonists like Asim Trivedi, Ravi Srinivasan for allegedly posting offensive tweets. Now, that is one part of the debate. The other part of the debate, Sanjay, also is that there is no denying that online platforms are problematic. They require fixes. Now, that fix has to be a balancing act between security on one hand and maintaining privacy and internet freedom on the other. But there is no denying that there are problems with online platforms. They are, they carry wrong news, they bring in fake news, and look at the kind of havoc they create.
Supriya, why don't we bite the bullet on this? You have had a journalist in Manipur who's been arrested for criticizing the government. We should read Swati Chaturvedi's book on trolling, which tells you how the right wing, principally the BJP, employs a social media army of thugs who go and do online intimidation, target women, humiliate them. I have had spokesperson from my party who have been abused and threatened, whose children were, threatened of the most vile, vulgar attacks, and this is the backing of the Bharatiya Janata Party. Gauri Lankesh is brutally murdered. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is following the very people who celebrated the death of Gauri Lankesh as a journalist. This message is coming from the top. I think it's about time we address the problem head on. The Bharatiya Janata Party has embraced social media trolling as a political strategy. They try to destroy Mr. Rahul Gandhi's reputation on WhatsApp forwards. We are aware of that. It is boomeranging on them today. But this is a brazen policy of abuse which Amit Malviya, principally, is the head of the IT cell, and everybody follows that. And I think today the problem that we have, Supriya, is that we are not recognizing how dangerous this is for democracy. This is the party that uses social media vehicles. This is a party that is essentially authoritarian in its character. Why hasn't Narendra Modi ever held a press conference? He doesn't have the courage. He never takes questions.
Okay, no, Sanjay, that's not a part of this discussion. No, one second, Sanjay.
They actually held press conferences with
Sanjay, that's not a part of this discussion. Sanjay, that's not a part of this discussion. I'm not going to be allowed to be digressed by, his not taking press conferences. He should, but he has not. But that's not a part of the discussion. Let's not bring the Prime Minister into this. But I would take it to Amit Malviya. And in closing comments, Amit, the question has to be that, it's very good to speak about free and fair elections. I think we should have free and fair elections. They should be devoid of any fake news. They should be devoid of any misinformation that threatens democracy and all of that. But aren't there better ways to do this? Because, impinging on privacy, regulating platforms, regulating free speech is not what 2018 in 2018 or 29 and India is going to tolerate. I'm sure there are better means to do this, and as citizens we would want elections to be free, fair, devoid of influences that are coming from a stupid WhatsApp forward or a Facebook post. But all I'm saying is that in 2019 you can't at will tell me to now regulate my speech online.
Well, Supriya, first of all, if the people of this country think that Rahul Gandhi is a clown prince, then I don't know why the Congress spokesperson would impute that to the BJP
No, that
or
message
to me
came from
personally.
you.
But if he thinks that's bothering
That
him,
message
then it's
came
good for
from
the
you.
country.
He
It
started.
came from your
The
leaders.
country
and
cannot have somebody
भैया
as
तीन
immature
राज्यों
and
में चुनाव
incompetent
हारे
as
हो,
Rahul
2019 में
One
भी
second,
चुनाव
one
हारोगे।
second.
the principal, the
ये
opposition
अहंकार और
party.
घमंड के कारण
Point number
2019
two,
में एक भी सीट नहीं
Supriya,
मिलेगा तुमको।
if
One second, Sanjay, Sanjay.
if you allow
Sanjay,
me
please.
to make
Sanjay,
my
please
point,
let him speak.
Supriya,
Sanjay, please
you're
let him
supposed to
finish.
moderate this debate. You're
Yeah,
supposed to
Sanjay, let
moderate
him
this
finish.
debate, please. Thank you.
No, don't
you've
tell
been
me what
very
I'm supposed to
kind
do on
the
my show. I
Congress
asked Sanjay
and
to keep
you've
quiet and
allowed
you
a
go
lot
ahead
of
and speak.
uncharitable comments, but I'll let that pass. But please moderate this debate,
Good.
Supriya. I expect you to be fair and not lean on the side of the opposition. I expect you to maintain a cordial debate here, please. Thank you so much. As far as these legislations are concerned, let me tell you that these legislations are up for public views, their consultancy. These are aimed to make the online experience of people far more satisfying for those in particular who could be vulnerable and who could be exploited. If at all there is any concern that people might have, which includes each one who's looking at this issue very closely, their inputs will be taken on board, and the framework will evolve in a manner that it does not peril India's security, it does not throw our society to interests who are inimical to our growth and our prosperity, and certainly does not target individuals and does not prey on the insecurities of people as they may have and they express themselves on social media. We have to strike a fine balance between what the privacy champions and activists demand and what average people see in terms of their security, and what are the imperatives for the government. And that could be around national security, it could be around drug trafficking, human trafficking, recruitment by Islamic jihadi organizations, and a whole host of activities. So this is an evolution process, this is a conversation, but we have made this right step in the right direction, and I think that is very important. And I go back again, the same people had opposed Aadhaar, the Supreme Court held it. The Congress and others had opposed it. They had to bite dust.
Okay.
So
Let's
let's
not go
not
to
get
Aadhaar.
carried away, and we must believe
Amit.
that the government is listening, and there's always room to make correction and get the right law in place.
Towards of ET now, don't lie. Don't lie.
I think that.
Don't lie.
One second,
Please don't lie.
Sanjay. I think Sanjay, one second. I think the last line is what is the most important line. There should always be room for correction. Whether it was Friday and the whole idea of a police state looking into your computers, or it's today, citizens of this country are a little perturbed. One doesn't know how much of data is now going to be compromised. One doesn't know what sort of curbs are going to come on free speech online, and which is where any government, and be it this government of the day, has to step up and keep that faith, keep that trust intact, and that is what we expect our policy makers to do. This hyper-nationalism in India, this fake news menace and things like that are obviously not good for free speech either, and one understands and appreciates it. But in the name of curbing that, should privacy be curbed? Should free views be curbed? I think that is where the line needs to be drawn. But thank you very much, Amit Malviya, Sanjay Jha, Pranesh, and of course Vrinda, for a very spirited discussion and a rather informed discussion on this. As for ET Now and my own moderating, I do not take sides. I do a balanced debate as much as I can. But I'm a human being, and I don't like my privacy to be compromised. I don't like my data to be leaked, and I definitely would want my freedom of free speech and expression to stay intact, irrespective of who is in power. Thank you very much for being with us. We take a quick breather. There's plenty more that's coming up right here on ET Now.